Friends, if you haven't liked and subscribed on YouTube, please do that. That means so much to us. Share the podcast with people who you think might find value in it. We work really hard on this, so every additional view, like, and subscriber really does mean a lot to us. And on your favorite podcasting application, your Spotify, Apple, Audible, so on, please give us a 5-star, leave comments on the episode, do anything that you can, because it does make an impact, not only on the algorithm, but us. As creators, we like to know what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, or if you ever want to hear more from a guest or less from a guest or a different type of guest. So thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy this one. Max, good evening.
Alex, hello. Good morning from where you are.
Yeah, from Germany, yes?
Indeed, yeah. So based in Hamburg, Germany at the moment, but as you can probably tell from my accent, originally from Manchester, England, born and bred, but I moved over to Germany about 9 years ago now.
One thing that you probably know about America, but if you don't, I'll inform you. We're terrible at picking up where accents are from. We're just like, that's not American English, but I don't know where it is. The biggest one you'll get is everyone thinks that English people are Australian because they'll say mate. That's like our checkbox. Said mate equals Australian.
Okay,
So,
then I'll try not to say mate.
no, you can. Everyone will just be confused. He's an Australian, but I think he had UK ties, and he's in Germany. So
yeah, it's very confusing. Everything east of New York, right?
yeah, it's across the pond, and there's other countries, but we don't get too stressed out about them. Max, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your current job and role is?
Sure. I'll try and keep it short and sweet because it's been quite the journey. As I said, from Manchester, England originally, and I actually did a PhD in chemistry at the University of Leeds. So it's
Whoa
to you, Alex.
Oh, jeez. I'll put that. Let me write that down on my notes real fast so I don't forget.
Please don't. I have not used that title ever because I quickly realized that doing chemistry was not for me. So I then worked for 15 years in business and as a business leader, predominantly in retail, marketing, customer data from supermarket loyalty cards. So I did that for 15 years before discovering coaching. And then I took qualifications in individual and team coaching and took the leap to go self-employed back in 2015. Now, in fact, one of the first leadership teams that I coached offered me a job in their company on their exec as the chief culture officer. I know culture is close to your heart, Alex. They actually offered me a job. And I accepted it, but I changed the job title. So for 2.5 years, I was a chief joy officer in the company. In fact, someone recently gifted me this T-shirt.
Nice. I like it.
Thanks. So I did that for 2.5 years. And the vision of that role was to create a place to work where people wake up on a Monday morning and can't wait to go back to work to make a difference.
What was that company? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
No, the company is called Loy Logic. It's a company in Switzerland, only 250 people, but actually based in 8 different countries. So that was also a big challenge. But yeah, so I did that for 2.5 years. Then went back self-employed again, co-founded a company called Motivators at Work with my business partner, Judith. And effectively what we do is we help businesses to perform better by creating highly performing, successful teams. In fact, teams that are cohesive, resilient, and effective. And we do that by bringing people together, connecting, building trust, and then co-creating truly as a team how to move forwards. So yeah, and I've maintained the title Chief Joy Officer. People seem to like it.
It's good. It should stick. Absolutely. Maybe I'll move into that role. I'm kind of titleless now at this point in time. I was telling you before we got started, I was the chief people officer of our company for like 4 to 5 years, which really was just the job nobody else wanted to do. So I was just like, okay, I'll do it. But now we've hired an HR director. She's going to kind of move into that role, and I'm going to shift out. So I'm still touching into that role, but I've had 5 years of HR, watching our team grow from, I don't know, maybe like 8 people when I started in that role to 37 people now at this point in time. So
what was the main purpose of your role then itself? What was the main purpose? Like, how did you, what was your vision of the chief people officer?
I would say it was 2 things. One, it's your typical admin HR type of things, hiring, firing. Hey, Alex, my 401k is not linked. All the stuff that I didn't want to do, nor did I feel like was a super productive use of my time. And then the second part, and you can probably speak to this, the piece that just sort of gets like mashed into HR, which is kind of silly because it's totally different from those like technical functions, is like, let's build a culture. Like, let's emphasize our core values. Let's emphasize our mission at the company. Let's hire the right people who are going to be culturally aligned with what we're trying to do. Let's move people into the roles that they're best at. Let's get everyone working towards a common mission. It's kind of silly because those two things are so different. One's like essentially accounting or like just like admin. The other is like teamwork, leadership, motivation, goal orientation, drive the mission forward. And it like, they almost don't align, but we just go HR. And then you have to like plan parties. It's like, why is that my job? Like, so
well,
that was what I did.
When one of the first conferences that I spoke at about the Chief Joint Officer experience was a big HR conference in Brussels. And at the end of my talk, 2 people came up to me literally in tears. I was like, wow, why is that? Because they were touched. And of course, because it was an HR conference, these 2 were quite senior HR people. And they came to me and said, you reminded me of why I went into HR in the first place. This to create a place to work where people look forward to going to work on a Monday morning. But I'm in tears because that's not what I do. Most of HR gets lumped with, as you say, the admin stuff. People go into HR, I think, because they like people, side of business, and they end up doing HR, legal and admin and dealing with all the crap from bad managers, et cetera, not the actual people stuff. And in fact, they often end up having to give people bad news that the company wants them to take the fall for. So I think there's increasingly these people experience departments within HR that try to separate the two, but you're right, it's 2 very different elements.
Well, then why don't you tell me a little bit about what the job of a Chief Joy Officer looks like then?
Yeah, so there's the difference between the Chief Joy Officer when I was on the exec of LoyLogic and what I do now, right? Even with the Chief Joy Officer title. Which one do you want to hear about first?
Let's hear about how it was at your previous company, and then we can talk about what life is like at the current moment.
Fine. And so basically I went in there and job number 1 was listening. A lot of listening, right? Listening into the organization, therefore the people. What is it like to work here? What's great about working here? And what gets in the way of that Monday morning feeling, right? So it starts with a lot of listening, going in with no pre-assumptions, just really what is happening in the company. From that place, so basically working out what's standing in the way of that joyful Monday morning. And then trying stuff out, right? So if the problem was collaboration between different countries' offices, trying different stuff, be it, and this was 2016, right? So it was obviously way before COVID. And it was also to an extent before Zoom really got big, right? Or StreamYard or whatever you want to call it. So we tried different things, from trying to do more cameras on WebEx stuff or Skype through to launching an in-company workplace app. We just tried things to solve the problems. And then a few of them stuck, a few didn't. So for example, this in-workplace app went really well. People put pictures on and they put their faces on, and they made little videos of each team in each country. And all of a sudden they had some fun together. And all of a sudden, these faceless people in another office suddenly became human. And that made a big difference. Humanizing people in other departments, humanizing people in other offices. That makes a massive difference in terms of, people working better together. So we listened in, we tried to solve the problems with new initiatives, and then we saw what worked, what didn't, and we stuck with it. That which worked.
I know I've heard you talk about that Monday morning feeling a lot. Can you just touch on that?
Sure. I mean, there's a thing that I do quite a lot when I'm standing in front of crowds, which is to get them to think about, and maybe you can think now, think back to a time when Monday mornings felt great. Right, just think of a moment in time when Mondays were great. Might be now, might not be. And think of a time when Monday mornings sucked. When even going to bed on a Sunday night, you had that feeling in the pit of your stomach. When I get people to answer that question, or like what were the common characteristics, right, that made Mondays great or awful, it's normally to do with the people that I work with, right? Like if I really enjoyed the people that I worked with, if I really enjoyed the teamwork that we had, and if I felt people have got my back, a lot to do with that people side, and a lot to do with I was doing a job that I simply enjoyed, that I got in the zone, that, I really felt it was the right challenge for me, and I really enjoyed doing it. And so Monday morning feeling is largely about that feeling of that I belong, right, within the group, that I feel seen, so valued and trusted, that I just love what I do, that it's my thing, and that I feel that I'm growing as well. Those are the 4 things that typically play into that Monday morning feeling.
What about people who say the experience that I had on that Monday morning wasn't something I was excited about? What are the common things you're hearing from those people?
It's the opposite of that, right? So it's normally I've got an awful boss who didn't trust me or made me feel awful, or I didn't like the team that I worked in. It's exactly the opposite of those things, right? I didn't feel valued. I didn't enjoy. I was bored. I was often bored by the content or over challenged. It's the exact opposite of those things.
Yeah, I think of like just toxic relationships. I know the word toxic is very overused, but when you say, remember a time, Alex, when Monday felt bad, it's relationships with ex-business partners that you can feel the energy in the air when you walk in. There's physically something there that you like walk in and it's like vibrating against your chest. I'm sure everyone's felt that experience when you're walking next to someone who you like don't like, and you can just feel like just negativity, probably on both sides. Those were the times that I always felt like I'm not excited to go in and do this. Just negative relationships with people. Those were small teams. Now we're much bigger.
Yeah, sure. And of course, that plays as well into that Sunday evening thing, right? When you're going to bed, you're thinking of that person. Oh, crap, I have to spend time with that person. It's amazing what percentage of that Monday morning feeling has to do with people. And yet businesses often talk about people as a sideline. The chief people officer often reports into the financial officer. Can be. Whereas actually, and it's not fluffy stuff, right? You've already pinpointed it. It makes a massive difference as to your motivation at work. And it's almost always people.
Well, let's drill down into that. One of the things that I heard you say previously was people should care about this because of the financials involved. So someone out there listening, maybe they have, a medium-sized team, small team, big team, doesn't matter. They have a million different things to worry about. Like, Max, I got to worry about like my accountant and my lawyer and our profitability, and our COGS are going up because of the economy, and our customers aren't buying, and our email click rate is low, and our ads are converting at a bad rate. Oh, I got to worry about another thing, Max. Like, dude, I don't have time for this right now. I don't have the financial resources to go out and buy ping pong tables for people. Like, I'm sorry, not right now, Max. What would you say to someone like that?
Before I go into the real answer, I would say if the ping pong table thing comes up, no one ever walked into work on a Monday morning and went, hooray, I feel motivated because there's a freaking ping pong table, or beers in the fridge on a Friday, or a party next month, or gym memberships or fruit bowls. No, there's nothing wrong with those things.
Hold on, Max. We have a lot of those things. We have beers on Friday. We have parties. And we also have a gym here at the office. So
nailed you.
Back off us for a second here.
There's nothing wrong with those things, but they aren't the answer to employee motivation. Sure, I think to an extent, people have got used to those things as a given, but they're never the answer. In fact, sometimes, I'm sure not in your company, Alex, but they are often the plaster over the wound, right? It's a bit crap to work here, so here's some things to make you forget about it, or think it's a good place to work. So I never advocate for ping pong tables and beers in the fridge in terms of that's the answer to your problems.
Well, I do think you're right in saying some managers will go, this is a great place to work. Like, what do you mean? Like, we have beers on Friday, and we We have, state fair that we're going to go to. You probably don't have state fairs or maybe even know what a state fair is. But we go to Top Golf, every year one time, and we do a Christmas dinner. Like at some capacity, that is us. And I do think some people in the leadership structure go like, we do a bunch of stuff for people. So they get a little fatigued almost when they hear about like, oh, we need to do another thing for the staff. It's like, we already do a lot of things for the staff.
Yeah.
And I'm trying always to be like, guys, like, remember, like, why are we doing this? Like, do we want to work in a workplace where it sucks in any way, shape, or form? Like, let's try to make this like the best workplace in Ohio. Let's try to make this the best workplace in the United States, not just like a good enough one.
Yeah. So the good news for those bosses that say we can't afford or we're already spending a lot on is that the things that matter literally cost nothing, apart from maybe some of your time. And yet that's time really well invested. If again, like I asked you, if you were to ask any other leader about their own personal experiences of a great Monday morning and an awful Monday morning, or period of time when they were bad and good, they will come up with answers like you just gave. They won't come up with, yeah, it was awful because we had a ping pong table. No, they will come up with those human reasons. And once they can think about that, I would like to think that they get curious about, well, what is it about my employees? Because if you also ask them, okay, so when you were feeling great and compare that to when you were feeling awful, what do you think your personal productivity was like? Boom, much better. So plus 30%, minus 40%. Whoa, 70% difference in employee productivity. Right? If that's not a reason to focus on Monday mornings, even if you don't care about the people, I assume you do, then that should be reason enough. And then all the problems you're facing with a 70% increase in employee productivity, that can help you get through all those difficult times, be it COGS or external forces or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I heard you cite a statistic, something around 3x, like a 3x bump in output of employees when they are enjoying what they're doing at work.
Yeah. And again, just have to think back to your experiences and how much more productive you believe you were when you felt crap compared to feeling great on a Monday morning.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has that experience. You come into work and whatever is going on in life is dragging you down, and you get done with the workday and you be like, look, I honestly feel like I got nothing done today.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to me about Chief Joy Officer right now. What is it like on the day-to-day function at the moment?
Yeah, so what I realized over time about myself was what really gives me energy and what, if I may say so, is my superpower, and that of Motivators at Work. It's bringing people together. It's that group experience to co-create stuff, to build trust, to build connection, because like your experience, if you can build a team that is cohesive, resilient, effective, that has that trust, that's got each other's backs, that Monday morning feeling is much more likely to be good, right? And of course, the team can be more productive too. So what we at Motivators at Work focus on, and my role as Chief Joy Officer as a consequence, is helping companies create cohesive, resilient, and effective teams. It's not about how the leader interacts one-on-one. It's about how the group, including the leader, behave as a team. And you just need to look at the best sporting teams ever, are the ones where there was a sense of cohesion, a sense of us, a sense of we've got each other's backs. Sure, you have to have the right players in the right positions, but without that cohesion, you're never going to win anything.
How do you think about like goal or purpose or like mission, both with a team or a company? Because you talked about times when I felt like Monday morning was really exciting. It was when I was like really close to like fulfilling a goal or fulfilling a mission or fulfilling a purpose. Like we're actually like, we can see the momentum is rolling and we're getting closer and closer and closer. Obviously that analogy works easily with sports teams, but every sports team wants to win the championship, right? You and I talked about our soccer teams. Like, our teams collectively always want to win the championship, but only certain teams are able to do that. How do you think about that singularity of purpose amongst teams?
Yeah, interesting. And when you play back this podcast, the way you just talked about achieving the purpose, you said you used the word we in every sentence. You started every sentence with we, right? Not I. And that's really telling. Purpose only works when it's our purpose. Purpose exists largely so that we together are on a common mission, maybe sometimes against a common enemy, but that we have a common purpose, ideally with a big P, right? Purpose to save the planet or make things better, but at the very least a small p, about we're achieving something, we're aiming for something together. It's about we. And that's where the purpose or mission can be helpful, when it stirs that sense of we, of us, so that we together can work together to achieve that. And I think companies that do it well make it a common purpose and not just a number.
Well, look at the Olympics, even individual events. As soon as someone wins an individual event, what do? They run over to their family. They go hug their mom, they hug their dad, they hug their spouse, they grab their coach, they go and lift their kids up into the air.
Yeah.
And they spend 10 seconds on the track, like fist pumping, and then they sprint straight to the sides where they can go be with their family. And that's a powerful image, right? You talked about stories, I heard you say on a podcast. This is the story that you can tell yourself and tell your team. That's like, everyone wants to do it as a team. And it is more fun winning as a team, right? If you win an Olympic gold medal, then you're like, I'm going to go out and like celebrate tonight. With who? You're the only one who did it. Like, yeah, you can celebrate with like everyone else, but nobody else knows really what that was like. Whereas if we're the basketball team that won, USA, then we can go out and celebrate like as a group. And it's like, hey, you were there with me for the thing, and you did your part, and I did my part, and coach did their part, and the trainers did their part. It's so much more fun, I think, to win as a group, and probably more powerful if you can get a group moving in one motion.
Yeah, correct. And the basketball analogy is a very interesting one. So again, I'm not a basketball fan, I apologize, but the dream team of which year was it?
Yeah, I think it's 94.
Right. And have you heard I don't know if it's a myth or the story, but I believe it's the true story of when the team first got together. They played against, as one of their warm-up games, they played against a college team, right? They were meant to whoop by like 40, 50 points. They lost, right? They lost against the college team. And that was almost intentional from the coach, because he wanted to show them you're not a team, right? You're a bunch of the best individuals that have ever played the sport, but together you're nothing yet. And so they spent the next few weeks before the Olympics working on that teamwork, cohesion, getting to know each other. Instead of these individual superstars, they became a group of human beings that had each other's backs. And then, of course, they went on to win it.
I just checked 92. I'll correct my year there. But yeah, I mean, it goes to show you that a group of individuals, and you see this all the time in sports, you put together this unbelievable team, but they don't always win. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you that you're going to be able to do it. And a lot of times that scrappy team, it's like the San Antonio Spurs. They were a team. They had Greg Pop, and they could just pull things together, even when they were fundamentally outclassed with talent.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And this is my question to you on the American culture versus, and I don't know what you know about European or at least the UK, but from across this side of the pond, there's a belief that the American culture is much more about I than other countries, right? It's like maybe partly because of its origin story. Everyone went there to make their fortune. Anyone can become president, right? There's this feeling of America's much more about I and about the superstar and individual stats and not team stats. Do you have a view on that? I mean, you've talked quite well about we in your organizations, but do you have a perspective on that?
Well, the one thing I would say is we certainly are very individualistic as a culture. And that's part of the division, actually, at the country level, is that there's a large group of people that think like, hey, like, it's on you, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, It's not on the government to come out there and, pay you your retirement and pay for your health care and pay for your disability and pay for your or pay for your child care and all these things. There's a group of people that are like, you need to go out and you need to do it. And then there's another group of people who go, this is totally inhumane. There's people who are a product of their environment and their circumstances. Like, it's going to be difficult for you to become super successful if you're born in a low socioeconomic environment. So we need to like give them like a little bit of a cushion, right? And really they end up talking past each other because one person's talking about the freeloader who's like scamming disability, and then the other person's talking about like the single mother who's working 3 jobs, right? So they're talking about totally opposite things, and they just use talking points to make their argument. The one thing I would say though is we definitely prioritize people and we celebrate people, which is one thing that I have heard about other cultures who get out there and they kick ass. Like generally, if Max gets out there and he gives a TED talk and he has a business and now he's doing great and he's a baller and he's making $1 million a year, you'll have like some people who are haters, and then you'll have some people who say like Max is only able to make $1 million a year because he's scamming people, or like he's like a cutthroat capitalist and he's oppressing his employees. You'll have some people who say that. By and large, people go like, Max is kicking ass. Like, hell yeah. Like Max is out there and he's doing it. I want to be like Max. And if I want to be like Max, what do I have to do? So celebrating like massive success, you could say it's a good thing, but there's also the dark side where it's like everyone is sort of like chasing at all times. I think this is part of why our culture is also very unhappy, is because everyone has like the lens of Instagram where you're seeing the highlight reel of Aaron Rodgers' life. And you're like, oh, dude, I make 200 grand a year. Aaron Rodgers makes $25 million a year. And you're like, dude, you make more money than 99.99% of the people out there. Like the stats are that if you make something like $35,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of all income earners on planet Earth.
Okay.
But if you're like a warehouse worker for us who would make like, base level salary, $18 an hour would make that. They would put them in the top 1%. But it is a bit of a comparison thing that you're like, well, I can't like go out and buy a Mercedes-Benz, German engineering, right? I can't go out and be like flashy and like awesome because they're comparing themselves to like the best and the brightest on Instagram, as opposed to like what life is like in Haiti, where gangs ravage the streets and you live on less than $1 a day. So I think I know that was a long-winded answer about the United States, but that is one thing that I see is we focus on forward a lot, and I would say we prioritize like the individual more so over the collective. But that leads some people to go, things are so amazing in Scandinavia, and then other people are like, Scandinavia isn't representative of the United States. You can't do that in a country of 330 million people. So I don't know the answer necessarily.
Okay, because I'm really curious. We've done some team building experiences in the States. And of course, it's a long way away simply. But I'm really curious as to how much emphasis is put on creating high-performing teams as opposed to just high-performing individuals, because that's what we do, right? We fundamentally focus at Motivators at Work on those high-performing teams, and we believe high-performing teams like the Dream Team from '92 focus on them being a team, right, as opposed to just great individuals. And I mean, there's so many companies that put some focus on that, but very few.
I would say one of the things I was thinking of before we got on the podcast is it's a country of extremes. Like we're very into extremes. Like if you want to build wealth, I want to be a billionaire. It's like, whoa, like how about you like become a millionaire first? And we get really excited. Like many, if not most of the billionaires worldwide are from the United States.
Yeah.
And it is a place where we have like people worth $100 billion. And then again, on the extreme other side, we have people who are like very poor and like legitimately struggle to eat. And I think we're okay with that as a country, because we go, hey, look, like we prioritize like just going for it. And sometimes going for it means that people will rise all the way to the top and then people will fall to the bottom. And I think we fundamentally believe like, hey, if you get 100 billionaire, like sometimes you may have to like have some poor people to give people the opportunity to get there. So we don't like take everything and just smush it down and everybody has like a kind of cushy medium in the middle. So within that, I would say if people want to maximize their teams, they will take it to the extreme, right? They will put heart rate monitors on them. They'll give them Aura rings. They'll, have every single message tracked. They'll do AI to value the level of the message. They'll take the inflection and note of that individual's speech and see how positive or negative it is. They'll take it to the absolute extreme and try to irk out those 0.01%.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you've got any good case studies, that'd be, especially in the States, I'd be very curious to hear at some point.
I mean, I would say Silicon Valley is like, the venture, another thing about extremes. The United States has like an enormous venture funding system, like as I'm sure you know. So if you roll up a startup and you can put a logical piece of business plan together, you can get funded for that, which I've heard is not necessarily true, like in the UK or maybe some other places in Europe. Certain places, London, maybe, yes. Northern UK, maybe not necessarily.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few startup hubs, and we have an increasing number of Silicon Valley people coming over to them. But we do quite a lot of work with startups in London to an extent, but actually more in Berlin, Barcelona, Zurich, even. They're all pretty good, vibrant hubs of the whole startup scene. And I mean, that's one of the good things about what we do. We work with everything from startups all the way through to multinationals, because we work wherever there's groups of people, right, who want to work better together. I say done a couple in the States, but normally with international teams. So I'd be really curious to do some more team building in America and seeing what the differences are.
Based on your experience, what do you think the differences are?
Good question. I mean, it varies from company to company as well, and even
Certainly.
from team, and even from within team to team. I sense, and again, only from a very small database here of what we've done, there's, in a business environment, maybe a slight reluctance from the Americans to go deeper in terms of to show themselves more.
I would agree.
In a working environment. So, of course, there's the classic stereotype cliche of Americans that say everything's awesome when actually things aren't. But then that ability just to kind of open yourself up and say, look, I'm imperfect, you're imperfect. That's what makes us a great team, right? Because we know each other well, we've got each other's backs, and we can help each other. Like, a team exists to work together to achieve common goals. And that working together bit only works if I think you need help. If I think you've got it all sorted, I'm not going to help you. And I'm probably not going to ask for help because I need to show you that I'm fine. So I think there's that slight reluctance from Americans to open up and say, I'm not fine.
I would agree, but I would also go back to extremes. You're going to find a business where that's not the culture, and like you need to be a hard ass at all times, and there's no room for Max's feelings. Like, hey, Max, like we're we're publicly traded, Max. Like we need to drive shareholder value at this company, and we don't have time for your feelings. And if you can't do it, we're going to get rid of you, and we're going to move you out, and we're going to bring in. There's 15 Maxes behind you that would love to have this job, right? There is a culture like that, and then there's going to be a business that like just goes all the way to the other direction. It'll be like 100% about your feelings. It'll be 100% about you feeling the best that you possibly can. They'll take it way too far.
Okay.
Like, and I see this with like causes too. Like we try to keep politics out of our business, but you'll have a business that just like makes it their identity, their political cause, good, bad, or ugly. I don't really care. There'll be like a trans inclusive coffee company. And you're like, I don't really know if that's that's necessary, but that's okay. Like if that's what you want, they'll have a trans flag, they'll have it on, they'll have the name, they'll have pictures in the walls, and you're just like, okay, like this is your thing. You're taking it to the extreme. Like that's fine. We don't have a lot of balance. So you will find some companies, but I would say that would be the biggest thing that I think is difficult for Americans to do is find balance. And balance, both on the internet and in culture and in business, is hard to make sexy. And I think that's, again, part of American politics, right? Like if I stand up and I say like Harris is the dumbest person that's ever lived, and here's her SAT test and it's low, and like that's gonna get like a ton of views and clicks. Or I could say the exact opposite about Trump, that he's evil and he's Hitler and da da da. That's gonna get clicks. If I say, you know what, I don't really know if either of them are representative of the American opinion, it's like, oh, screw that. That's not cool. That's like not worth it. I think the same thing is true in business and our culture. Like if I say like, hey, employee motivation is the thing, it's the North Star, it's 3x return, I think everyone like who's into it, they'll get on board. If I say it's important, but we have 20 other things to worry about, it's like drowns out.
Okay. And I think this is interesting because employee motivation, and maybe this is one of the things, and this is one of the things that we struggle to get across, or that's important to get across, is it's not just about the fluffy stuff, right? But it's not just about the hard stuff. It's about both, right? Like it's about the hard stuff. Like, is this person doing a good job? Are they enjoying the content of their work, and are they able to excel? Because we both know when you're doing a good job, like when you're doing it well, that's far more motivating than drowning. Of course it is. So it's about the hard stuff, right? Of course it is, but it's also about the soft stuff, if you want to call it that. Yeah. Do I get on with my colleagues? Do I enjoy coming to work on a Monday morning? Do I feel valued and recognized and trusted? But at the end of the day, yes, it feels soft at first to people who are going just about numbers. Yeah. But if your people, by feeling valued and trusted, deliver 60%, 100% more productivity, that's got to be good for the numbers too. So it's not about either or, right? Numbers, feelings. You can absolutely combine the two. In fact, combine the two.
Your term togethership. That's the first time that I've heard that. Max, tell me about that. What does that mean?
Yeah. So as I was preparing for my first TED Talk, and thank you for referencing that, now available on YouTube and the TEDx website.
We will link it. Don't worry. We'll get everybody to watch.
I had to get the plug in.
People loved it. Your comments were fantastic. People were really loving it in the comments.
Thank you. So as I was preparing for my first TEDx talk, I knew what I wanted to talk about. I knew I wanted to talk about the power of the group. But the power of the group sounded too like a overused term. And I knew that what I wanted to talk about and my passion, right, and what we do, because it's our passion at Motivators at Work. As I started to crystallize it into thoughts, I was like, one thing that we never teach leaders is how to create cohesive, resilient, and effective teams. I've never seen it. Right? That's why they need team coaches like us, right, to do it for them, because they can't do it themselves. So how can we teach leaders? How can we, in that leadership manual, have much more about togetherness of their teams? And so therefore, all of a sudden, togetherness and leadership came together to form the newly invented word togethership. Because that's what our passion is, that yes, we want to help teams to do that, but there's only 2, 4, 10 of us at Motivators at Work. We want the world of work to be a better place. So if we can help leaders learn how to create those cohesive, resilient, effective teams, that togetherness, we bring to the world the concept of togethership.
Paint me a picture of what togethership looks like kind of in action.
So there's 4 key elements to creating togethership, what we call to crack the code. The first key element is just bringing people together intentionally. Intentionally is the big word here, because we bring people together all the time, right? But when you do do it intentionally. Why are you bringing people together? What's the purpose? Be that an offsite experience or even your weekly team meeting. Be intentional. Because when we came around a campfire as tribes, it was absolutely an intention behind that, was to share stories, to build bonds and connection with the group, to have each other's backs. There was an intention around it. You've probably heard this from a number of your other podcasters, I guess. The proliferation of meetings just because, right? That lack of intentionality behind bringing people together. So if you can really focus, first of all, on bringing people together intentionally, that's huge, right? Why are you bringing people together? I hope it's not just to share PowerPoint, right? Or listen to one person talk. Surely there must be a more important reason to bring people together. And that's the first key. I don't know if that makes any sense, Alex, to you, the first key.
I heard you say this, and I think you were talking about data. It was the what and the so what and the now what, essentially. So it's like, well, what reason are we getting together? Like, okay, so here's the things that we learned through that, and like, now what? Now, what do we do with it?
Yeah,
I liked that.
Thank you. Yeah, that came from my customer data life. So it's really about bringing people together intentionally at first.
So
and if you're not,
can I just linger on that for 1 second?
yeah, please.
So we have 36 people. We do have a unique dynamic in our business that maybe you've dealt with, maybe you haven't, but we have an office team and a warehouse team.
Yeah.
Sometimes those staffers are quite different from each other.
Sure.
Which you're going to get in any sufficiently large organization, and you should. You don't want to have like just 100 Alexes. That would get painful for some of the customers out there. They're like, I need a different voice that I'm hearing. So we have kind of a group of like blue collar laborers, and then we have a little bit more of a white collar. As I'm bringing everyone together, our 36, 37 people, like, what are the things that you're wanting to think about? We had a grill out session on Friday. Like, everybody comes together. How do you make that impactful as opposed to just like the business cooked us lunch? Cool,
Yeah.
thanks.
When people have offsites, they typically do one of two things. Either it's let's sit down and listen to PowerPoint for 6 hours a day and then finally have a beer in the evening and do the real team building. Or they go, oh, we don't want to do that, so let's just have a barbecue. Let's just have a grill, or let's just go paintballing, or whatever the thing is. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be a little mixed. It can be a bit of a mixture of both, as in a mixture of fundamentally helping those human beings connect. But I'll go back one step for you on that. Before, when we work with leaders on their get-togethers, be it an offsite or big team meetings, we ask them to answer the following 3 questions. As a consequence of this event, what do you want people to feel differently, think differently, and do differently compared to before the event? If you can't answer that question, don't have the event, because it's just a waste of time. But everyone can answer that question with a little bit of thought. Why are you bringing them together? What should they feel differently? And I really mean feelings. Thinking differently and doing differently.
So as I'm entering that, Friday afternoon barbecue, I want to be thinking, how do I make people feel with this? Is that interpersonal, or is that how do they feel about the business as a whole because they gave us this like benefit thing?
Okay. It's more and even before you decide it's going to be a barbecue, right? You're going to get you're going to get the whole company together as a consequence of whatever get together it is. So even before you start planning what it's going to be, how do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel connected? Do you want them to feel valued? Do you want them to feel, what's the main feelings you want them to take away? What do you want them to think? Do you want them to think the company cares about me, or I know how to work better with my colleagues now, or right? What do you want them to think differently? And then what do you want them to do differently? So the week after the event, which might not be a barbecue anymore, the week after the event, what do you want them to do differently? Do you want Steve from the manufacturing, from the warehouse, and Pam from the office, do you want them to sit down and have a meeting, like talk more together? Because that's going to make, like, think about the answers to those questions, and then you might say, okay, is that a barbecue? Is it half a day of team building and a bit of fun? Do we need more information share? Like, that's the intentionality.
That's interesting. As you were talking, I was kind of thinking what my goal would have been with that barbecue would be, one, I want everyone to be appreciative that the company is making this offer, making this gesture. We do weekly goals. If we hit our goals, then we get one of 4 different benefits. We get either bonus time off, bonus pay, actually 5 benefits: leave early, lunch, breakfast. So if we hit our goals, which we don't hit, honestly, we don't hit most weeks, we kind of try to make them difficult, right? You want to make them hard enough that you're not just like stipending their salary with this extra thing that it loses value at some point. I would want to show them we care. And then I would want to just have people connect across the aisle, if you will, with individuals they maybe don't talk to as often. So my office team, like, I don't think they do the best job of like going out into the warehouse and talking to those staffers. And then I think the warehouse is like almost like nervous to come talk to the office, like as if they're like interrupting our day by like just walking in and like saying hi. So that would be the goal, is just like get people talking to new folks at the company. I know we're only 36, 37 people, but you'd be surprised at how easily that forms, even when you have like 10, 11, 12 people.
Yeah, and then I would be designing it a little bit differently, because I'd be then be designing, okay, if you want people to connect, to an extent build trust, you might want to do before the barbecue, you might want to, or enjoy, you might want to do a couple of things that, without being too cheesy, make sure that they mix, right? And make sure that they get to know each other, because there's the danger at the barbecue, they're just going to hang around with their mates.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
That I would have that happen on Friday. You just go stand around, talk to the people you always talk to.
Correct. So you therefore, with the intentionality of the experience design, you then design it to create more moments where they can interact and, like I mentioned at the start, humanize each other. Just like, even though he works in manufacturing, you know, he's not all muscles and whatever. And just because he works in the office doesn't mean that he's all haughty-taughty and thinks too much of himself, right? You know, like, just to humanize each other. And there's ways of doing that, again, which aren't too cheesy, which would then bring me to the next part of unlocking togethership. Now you know what you want to achieve. Togethership is a lot about then connecting as human beings, right? Finding ways to have that campfire experience where you just get to share stories, get to know each other. And yes, you hope that happens over the barbecue, but it might not, because they'll form in their groups. Find ways to get people to share their stories. Find ways for people to have a laugh together. There's lots of evidence that physiologically, when we laugh with each other, we actually form a stronger bond. And that's the whole point of human laughter, is to bond the tribe together more. Right. So all of these things, all these ways to make people connect, is crucial as well. That's part 2.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. Those are some things that I could take away. So potentially maybe like assigned seating, and hey, Max, you're going to sit next to another person that you've never talked to, and then maybe like a topic of some sort that you need to talk about, and then kind of let them go from there.
Yeah, and you can throw in as well a lot of fun as well, especially if you're doing it with that barbecue. You don't want to make it too heavy. Right, okay, yes. Now sit down and talk about childhood trauma.
Yeah.
But there's also fun, like, you know, what was the first concert you ever went to, right? Or who was your teenage crush? Or, you know, like, you can throw questions in there that are a good laugh as well. And you can also get them to talk about their experiences of work as well at some point. Like, once you get deeper into it, what frustrates you, right? What do you love? What are you proud of? All these things that just get people on the same page as human beings.
I think you hit on something that's also really important for people in the HR culture, joy space. It's that you have to be cautious about doing too much. People start to push back when it's like, I have assigned seating and then I have 15 questions that I have to go through. And it's just like, dude, I just want to eat my lunch. Like, can I just let me, you guys got me this barbecue, but now I'm feeling like I kind of got entrapped into like a thing that I didn't really actually sign up for.
Yeah. So this is where making it light helps, right? Or at least starting with that lightness. So one thing is, when I'm with a team, we always do a small energizer at the start of every session. It doesn't have to be cheesy. It's not fall into my arms stuff, right? But for example, I get people to stand in groups based on how many kind of siblings have you got, right? And then they'll stand in groups and they'll see what they have in common. I might get them to stand in groups based on which building they're based in or which department they're based in. all of those kind of things. And then I'll say, right, the whole point of the next hour or two is that you're no longer in those groups. Make every small exercise that we do, get yourself into a nice, colorful mixture of people based on whatever number of siblings, based on which department you're working, whether you're white collar, blue collar, whatever. But you give them as adults the ownership of who they end up speaking to. Right? As opposed to now, by the way, blue collar, white collar, blue collar, white collar. Right now, you're together. Right? But you give them the reason why, and then let them as adults make that decision. And 99% of the time, it works every time.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of like kind of worrisome psychology around like teams. They've done these studies where you get assigned as a blue team and it's random. Like you watch them flip a coin and then you get assigned blue team, and then the other person gets assigned as red team. And then how they treat each other, just like they quickly fall into like blue team wins, red team bad. And it's like you watched them randomize this team selection. That like literally a flip of a coin could have changed which team you're on. And they'll rate the other team as like less trustworthy and like less intelligent and like all these like sort of like frightening things where you're like, dude, you watched this team get picked like 20 minutes ago. So, I mean, I think that's an important thing, breaking down those teams that you just talked about, but also at the same time, like not making it such a big deal that we're the office team, we're the warehouse team, even having that label. Like I don't try to use that label because then you're already building in, hey, there's two teams. And the TV show, The Office, if anyone's ever watched that out there, started as a British TV show, right? That is so true that like there's this real like divide between office and warehouse teams. And I've talked to other people and they're like, yeah, it's inescapable. Like it emerges. It's an emergent property of the office warehouse dynamic.
Yeah, yes, it is. And there's amazing research as well on the power of physical placement. Like just being in two different buildings, which I'm assuming, or different halves of the building, right?
Yeah.
The studies around if people sit within 4 meters of each other, the way they collaborate is almost 180 compared to if they sit 12 meters away from each other. Right? Like just the pure physical spacing creates such divides. So you're never going to avoid it. Sometimes it's even worth acknowledging it. Right? It is worth acknowledging because it's there. It's in the air. Everyone knows about it. Look, we know we've got two parts of this business. And yet the more those two parts of the business work well together, the better our working lives and business will be for both of us. Right? Therefore, for the next couple of hours, we're going to invest some time in not just across buildings, but across the whole organization, getting to know each other better, because that's going to make working together so much more fun and enjoyable in future.
Yeah, the reality is that a warehouse operation literally has to be walled off from an office operation because of noise. So you can't have my office sitting in the middle of the warehouse where everyone around me is like moving around and tape guns are squawking. You walk into our warehouse, people are like, what is that? Is that a dog? Is that it sounds like a duck? Like those are tape guns. Clearly you've never been in a warehouse before because that's what a tape gun sounds like. But we have to be physically separated. I think in the Office TV show, they were in like the basement or something like that. They were like literally below them. And I would say try not to do that. But I think what you're talking about is the Allen curve. In communication theory, the Allen curve is a graphical representation that reveals the exponential drop in frequency of communication between people as the distance between them increases. It was discovered at MIT. So basically this individual, he was looking at the highest performing teams and he was trying to figure out like what the link was between them. And eventually he found out like, oh, the highest performing teams have the least amount of distance between each other. So like Max and Alex talk to each other all the time because instead of me having to like walk up a flight of stairs and then walk 30 feet and walk into your office, like I'm just not going to do it. It's too much work. I'm just not going to communicate with you on it. But if you're down the hall, I just go, hey, Max. And then you're like, oh, okay.
Hey, I've got a quick problem with my laptop. Can you help? Sure. Or who wants a cup of coffee? Yeah. Just those micro interactions make a huge difference.
How would you coach me up on this? We're going to have a new beautiful office, but it's 2 stories. And there's going to be a first floor and a second floor, 4,000 square feet. We have like 15 different offices. And at the onset, it's going to be totally random who gets placed where.
Why?
But I already know that it will have an enormous impact on the actual working relationship of people.
And there's a few questions to ask before I give you an answer. What's the remote work policy?
So we mostly work in the office. I would say that 9 out of 10 days, the whole team is in the office. We did that during COVID. We're a logistics business. I don't like to create rules for thee, but not for me. So if the warehouse team has to come in and expose themselves to COVID, like I am not going to work from home and be like, hey, your lives are not as important as mine. So I'm going to be safe at home, but you have to keep shipping packages. So I just said, everyone comes to work every day. Like this is what we do. And I will be honest, I think that works better for us.
Yeah, cool. Good. And I will never judge. I think what's really interesting is a company I worked with called Mentimeter. They said, so they aligned their working from home policy with their company culture. So one of their values, which they live, is we before I.
Okay.
And if they believe in we before I, well, we should be together more often.
Right. You have to sacrifice a little bit.
You have to sacrifice. That's fine. If you don't want that, that's okay. But this isn't the company for you, right? Wasn't quite Musk-esque in it's like you have to be in all the time.
I was gonna say it sounds a little bit like Elon. Like, hey, I want people who will work 16 hours a day. If that's not for you, that's cool.
Not that. There's an absolute belief that you can be in, like you can not be in whenever your life needs you not to be, right? If you've got a doctor's appointment, if you've got to take your kid to their first day of school, if their kids, whatever, do that. Please do that, right? But when that's not happening, please be in the office. And so that just aligning with the culture, and your culture is also a warehousing culture as well, manufacturing culture. Therefore, that fits too, and I think that's fine. Anyway, back to your point. Without knowing much more, I would let the people decide. Let them work out. I'd give them a nice framework, right? And maybe a good workshop to have grown-up adult conversations to co-create, right? To co-create what should the office be and why. And let them co-create what the solution should be. Now, you need to give them some framework, right? And some ways to define that. But within that framework, I'd say, people, help us work this out. What's going to be the most productive and effective for us, for you, as teams, as an organization? And I'd be really curious where that came out.
That was sort of my initial plan. I mean, gosh, assigned seating, like we've talked about, sounds a little bit like, come on, management. Like, we're grown-ups. Do we need assigned seating? Do we need assigned offices? Where, okay, Austin's going to work next to Alex because they're partners, and the next to Alex is going to be the CFO because he's in the executive team, and next to the CFO is going to be the COO, and then brand reps will be across the aisle, so that it's just like, oh, geez, it might be too much. Just kind of, maybe I give them, a discussion on the Allen curve, like, hey, this is kind of how it works. People who work together collaborate together more frequently. If you want to collaborate with this person or you've collaborated them in the past, I would suggest that you don't be first floor corner there on the second floor corner, because you'll probably just end up collaborating less.
So yeah, I would give them a framing of the whole thing, a framing in terms of, okay, here's what our purpose is. Here's what we're trying to achieve. Here's our strategy for the next year or two, right? Here's some of the things that we absolutely have to achieve to get to that mission. Maybe some info, like you said, the Allen curve or whichever other information you want to give them. And here's some non-negotiables, right? Non-negotiable is office people don't sit in the warehouse because it's too loud, whatever. Like whatever the non-negotiables are, give them those and say, right. And then give them the right workshop framework to go discuss, be that cross teams, in teams. I think that depends a bit, mixing warehouse and office, whatever you want to call it. And I'd be really curious what they came up with. But again, you have to give them a nice framework to go through as opposed to just random conversation.
I will update you with how it
Please.
turns out. Uh, Max, talk to me about roots and fruits. I know we've kind
So
of woven that in, but let's go
yeah,
through it
yeah. The Roots
one
and
by
Fruits
one.
is almost was almost a precursor to Togethership.
Mm.
Um,
It's sort
so
of like the
maybe,
building blocks that
yeah,
equal
to an
togethership.
extent. So the Roots and Fruits is the 4 key elements to drive that Monday morning feeling. Togethership is more specifically how to create that cohesive, resilient, effective team. So it focuses very much on the team part. So it's more of a crystallization.
Because I'm in the HR mindset right now, togethership is the mission, and maybe roots and fruits are the core values.
Ooh, it's an interesting one. Okay, let me quickly take you through the roots and fruits, and then I will maybe help. That will maybe help me to crystallize the answer to that question. The roots and fruits contains the 4 key elements from our experience and all the research to what drives that Monday morning feeling. And it's not just teamwork that drives that Monday morning feeling, right? The 4 things are: 1, I belong. That sense of I belong to this tribe. I belong to a common purpose, that we're in this together. That's very much where the we is in I belong. Because we are fundamentally tribal creatures, and we need to feel like we belong. 99% of people plus. So there's I belong. Then there's I am seen, which is, as part of that tribe, I am seen and valued and trusted and acknowledged and recognized as a key individual in that tribe. I belong, I'm seen. Then we go up to what we call it's my thing. And it's my thing is really that sense of I love my day job. I love what I do. I'm great at what I do. I get in the zone. Of course, I don't get overruled by my manager as a consequence, right? Because it's my job. So it's my thing. And then the 4th thing is I am growing. And that's that sense of having new challenges and the support to achieve them, right? Growing is not just about a promotion or pay rise. It's about that personal sense of growth. So we've got I belong, I am seen, it's my thing, and I'm growing. The 2 at the bottom, we call that the roots, that which binds us to what we do. I belong and I'm seen. So that's the real human element. And the bits at the top, it's my thing and I'm growing. We call that the harvesting the fruits of our labor. That's really the doing stuff. And that's what we call the fruits, of course. So that's the roots and fruits. I would say Togethership is very much rooted in the I belong space. Right? In that it's going a whole level deeper in terms of the we part, which really falls into I belong a lot more. Make sense?
Yeah, I have had many a person decide to quit or leave our business because they felt as if they didn't have those first 2 elements.
The first 2, okay.
Yeah,
Roots.
somehow they think like they don't appreciate me, I don't belong, nobody likes me here at this business. Sometimes it's just totally not even true. It's just like sort of like a thing that they like build up in their head necessarily.
Yeah.
But I would say generally if someone quits a business, it's probably because of those first 2 things. That's what I have personally seen.
Yeah.
Sure, maybe like it's not my thing, or I'm not gaining enough experience, but you got to be in a pretty good position to like actually get to that, right? That's like up the up Maslow's hierarchy a little bit. I would say a lot, especially like with my warehouse team, when they decide to quit or leave the business or like fire themselves. I've seen that a lot too. They will say like they don't care about me, or like everyone in the warehouse hates me, which is, you know, not the environment we're trying to create, obviously.
Yes.
But you know, we've had probably 60 to 70 people come in and out of our company now at this point in time, along with long-term employees.
Sure.
So
If I was a leader, I'd get super curious on those experiences. Like, not just what are we doing wrong, but what kind of person doesn't feel appreciated here?
yeah, interesting.
Because that would lead me in the hiring process. Because that might also help me to refine my understanding of my culture and our values. Like, why did those people leave? Yes, what were we doing wrong? But also, what What was it about them that made them not feel valued? What did they need that we couldn't offer them? I'd get super curious about that, because that would be a really rich source of information.
I'm spitballing, but I would think that the people that I can think of that fell into that camp were a little bit emotionally immature, and they wanted us to be more for them than just a place to go to work. Like, they wanted us to solve all their problems. And when I couldn't solve all of your life's problems, it's like, there's a problem. What is it? It's my job. They suck. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. Like, you told me just like 4 months ago, this is the best place you've ever worked. So like, I don't think that we suck. I know, because you told me like we don't suck. So I'm just wondering, like, if that would be it. That's what I point to mostly off the top of my head.
And I would try and flip it as well and go, if you're in their shoes, what were they thinking and seeing? Because it's very easy to say they were the problem, right?
I definitely want to take my amount of blame too, but also I do want to balance that with the track record we have of success with like a lot of employees. So it's like, hey, if you have an outlier here, it's like, you don't want to totally invalidate everything that they say. Obviously, I get that. But you also don't want to be like, one person quit, let's flip our whole culture around. It's like, yeah, it's working for like 95% of the folks.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting flip it like that. I mean, you call them emotionally immature, which may be true from your perspective. What would their perspective be? Just to make sure that you don't, because I'm sure when a person comes for interview, that they're not going to say, "Hi, I'd like a job here. I'm emotionally insecure," right? Or immature. Sorry, is what you said. What would it be that they would say about themselves, or from their perspective, what was the company not doing for them, so that you can spot them before they join, right? As opposed to changing your culture, how do you ensure that those people don't join as much for their sake as for yours?
Yeah, I think that's an important lesson to kind of learn from the failures of your employees. And the one thing that I have learned is that both me and my HR team and anyone out there, it's super difficult to hire. You can't trust your gut. You don't know who's going to pan out. I'm sure you, having been with big teams and lots of folks, like especially in the HR world, sometimes you get a hire and you're like, I've crushed it. This person's going to kick ass. And then in like 6 weeks, they bounced out and you're like, I cannot believe that one didn't work. Like, geez. So I just don't trust myself and my gut any longer in hiring decisions.
Have you ever done a thing called DISC, or the colors model, before?
You talking me personally or as a business?
You personally?
I think so. I think I'm red.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Why do you say that?
Well, you call yourself quite rightly the entrepreneur.
Among other things.
Among other things, an entrepreneur is typically a pretty red thing, right? It's about going out there and achieving, and doing something new, and taking your own path and going your own way. All that's very red. The reason I mention it is not to say I guessed you're red. The reason I mention it is because greens, so they're the opposite of red, are very good at reading people. Where did I come to that thought? You might have someone in your team who might be very good at reading people. Like, are they going to work here? Because you might not. Or kind of red will typically look at like achievements and drive and that kind of stuff. But the more subtle stuff, greens, or people that have that greater intuition about human beings, especially at a deeper level, they may be quite good to involve in your hiring process. And I know if there's anyone that you can pinpoint who told you, I'm not sure, and then they were right. And if you don't know who that person is, find them.
Just to linger on that topic, how do you think about hiring for the culture? I know you're talking about kind of inverting and working backwards. How do you think about hiring for a team to both bolster your culture and also find good people who are going to push the needle forward?
I think finding people with drive is the easier part, because you can tell. I think if someone's got the drive.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think the will they enjoy working here, and will they add to our company in that respect? That's a harder call. obviously the company's values can be very helpful if they are truly the company's values
Yeah.
and not what the CEO decided the values should be, wants to be. Because if you nail your values properly, and especially the darker side of your values, right? Meaning, so you say, here's the things, and values are often best expressed as in terms of with a verb, right? So so it's more the values in action, right? So to think of some good examples off the top of my head, we decide based on we before I. Oh, that's about how we decide. You can see, okay, in every decision we're looking at we, right? But if you get your values right, then you can definitely hire for values. But importantly, you can also say, this is what our values are. Here's what we're not. Future employee, yeah, we are a whatever, we get shit done at all costs company, and we live that. That means, by the way, it can sometimes be a bit stressful to work around here because we are constantly looking to push the needle every day. Now, which one do you want? Because you can't have both, right? So often to paint the dark side can be helpful, right? Here's what you're really in for when you work here. All this good stuff, you have to do all this stuff. And here's the stuff that's the dark side that can be powerfully helpful.
Yeah, just on our emblem here on my hat, building and delivering. We say building relationships, delivering results. Okay. So building and delivering, those are the ING words that we sort of try to live by. Okay. Try being a big point there.
Okay. So, but building is about relationships, not about the company, right? Per se.
Both, but yes, in this context, building relationships.
Okay. Interesting. There's lots we could talk about there, but yeah, good. That's good. The question is then how much do you reward those behaviors, right? When you see them and call them out. Big kudos to Steve, who recently built a relationship. Steve from manufacturing or warehousing, who built a relationship with Pam from The Office, not the TV show. Because as a consequence of doing that, we delivered better results because suddenly we closed a loop in the business which wasn't working. Like, how much do you celebrate those values as well? And that's key.
I would say that's an area of struggle for our business, probably an area of struggle for a lot of business, is like applauding the wins, right? Because we have a very negative bias. This is also something that I try to talk to my leaders about. Like, hey, you can't only talk to someone when something goes wrong. Like, you have to like build a relationship with this person, and yes, call out those wins. Because I think it's something like, for every 7 or 8 positive things you say to someone, if you say one negative, they'll cancel each other out. So if you say 2 negative things back to back to Max, it's like, geez, now I need to produce like 17, 18, 20 positive things to become like neutral with Max, where it's like, hey, my boss, like, yeah, I think he likes me. I think he thinks I'm doing an okay job. If you say back-to-back negative things, like Max can be like, my boss thinks I'm an idiot. He hates me. He'll never trust me again. It's like, whoa.
Do you see a link maybe then to why all those people left? But anyway, okay.
We have a great culture for anybody listening. We just won the best place to work in our city, albeit a small city, but we were #1 rated, Max. So
no, I think but I think what probably makes you one of the best companies to work for is that you are prepared to self-reflect.
Yeah,
right?
I would say exactly what I was going to say. We are going to give it an honest effort. And to your point earlier, sometimes you try things and they don't work, and you go, okay, we signed up for this app. It was like a applauding app, and nobody else signed up, and it was a waste of money, and we canceled it. And it's like, okay, didn't work. We're going to keep on trying, though.
Yeah, and despite your asterisk just a moment before about, hey, we are a great employer, I genuinely, from our conversation, and we've only known each other the last 2 hours, I would really enjoy working in your company because you're prepared to self-reflect. You're prepared to say, how can we get better? We ain't perfect. How can we get better? The moment a company says, we're great, we don't need number one, why try harder? Is the moment the company doesn't actually care. So, and I think that's crucial to anyone watching, is that any leader, how can you say to your team, and again, vulnerability is massively important at the moment. How can you say, I'm not perfect, we're not perfect, we're doing our best, how can we get better? Is a massively important message.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about your kind of pillars for leadership, because I think a lot of people listening will probably be a leader. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you clearly are trying harder to get better in life than somebody who doesn't care at all. But the things that I say about leadership are comfort building. Like you got to build a relationship with your people, like first and foremost, because again, if I need to tell Max, like, hey, you've been doing a great job, but the last thing that you did just wasn't up to your level. And I think you and I probably know it. If I don't have any relationship with you, then that's going to be a lot harder. Transparency, I think you need to be like clear, open, and honest with your people. To your point, I tell people all the time, like, I don't have all the answers. Like, I have never built a company past 37 people. So what happens at 38, 39, 40, 40, like, I'm doing this for the first time, everybody. Like, I'm not the smartest person you're ever going to meet. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to try. But I want to be honest with you about what's going on, because I think this is one of the worst things that leaders and politicians and all these people in these higher end roles do, is they will never admit that they're at fault. They'll never admit their flaws. They'll never, like I don't know if you're following, we're going back to American politics, but the Secret Service, the gal, she got grilled in front of Congress for like 6 hours. And she never once said, like, you know what, we did not a great job. Like, and I take total accountability for that. And I want to go in and I want to clean house. Like, I want to get rid of a bunch of people who dropped the ball in this. She did not say that at all. And that was like all I think she honestly needed to say was, you know what? Was like, 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 you know what? Is like, we've had a bad culture for 4 or 5 years. I haven't done enough to fix it. This is a wake up call. You know, thank God that the former president was not killed in this assassination attempt. This is our opportunity to like literally turn over a new leaf. She didn't say that. She just kept saying, well, and this, and we didn't want to put someone on the roof because it was slanted. And people were just like, I think you're going to come off way more trustworthy if you're just honest with people. Like, you know what? I screwed that up. You know what? I had the opportunity and I missed on that. But next time I'm going to learn from it. And I'm going to take the ball and run. And then the last thing that I tell people is comfort building, consistency. So you just need to have like the same rules and apply them across the board. Like if you can do those 3 things in leadership, you're going to be in a pretty good position.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of them. And you've also proved my point. I've never heard any leadership principles which include creating a cohesive, resilient, and effective team. So I would agree with everything you just said. And I would maybe use other words, but in essence, what you said. And I'd point people towards psychological safety, right, and vulnerability-based trust, and Brené Brown and Amy Edmondson, and all of those things and more. And that's a lot about me and the group. Nothing wrong with that. Leaders should absolutely think about the perception of me, right? Am I transparent? Am I consistent, right? Am I open and honest? And that's about me and this group of individuals. How do I create, or how much focus am I putting in making sure everyone's got each other's backs? Right? Not just I've got their back and they've got mine, but everyone's got each other's backs. That's the only thing I would add, or that's my big message, right? With Togethership, to an extent with the roots and fruits, especially in the roots. Like that focus on the we. Is the big build. Now, to create that we, yes, as we talk about in Togethership, bring people together intentionally, connect on a human level. The next one that I didn't mention earlier, build vulnerability-based trust, because only then have you got each other's backs properly. And lastly, truly co-create as a group. Hence my suggestion to you regarding the deciding how to do the office space. But point 3, the building vulnerability-based trust, only works if the leader is prepared to show that vulnerability too. which is why what you just said, I completely agree. Hold your hands up and say, I don't have all the answers, or I made a mistake. I'm human too. Let's not make it again. And that vulnerability is crucial. But that lays the groundwork for the team to show the vulnerability so that everyone has got each other's backs.
So maybe if you were to add a fourth element to my leadership trifecta, it would be stop thinking about what the leader does and start thinking about how do I pull everyone into this thing.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And you're doing that as well, because I almost can't find the right words sometimes. I mean, hopefully I've found the right words in Togethership, in the TED Talk, but nothing explains it as well as this, creating that circle of us, right? As opposed to him and them, or him and them, or them. This circle of we is the best way I have to explain it.
Yeah, and for those listening, we're drawing a circle with our fingers here, and it almost like a spider web, if you will, where like Max interacts with Pam, and then Pam can interact with Dave, and Dave can interact with Bill, and Bill interacts with Max, who Max interacts back to this person. So
That's
essentially, you can create that web of people where actually it doesn't need to come from you.
Correct. Absolutely. In that respect, 100% agree. The only thing I was going to build onto it is it's not just about the individual relationships, although that's absolutely right. It's about those as well. When you're in a team that is cohesive, resilient, and effective, you can just feel that sense of us, right? It's not just me and Pam and me and Dave and me and Alex, although that's also crucial. Just that sense of us. We are in this together. And I'm sure the best sporting teams, as you mentioned before, display that too.
Well, let's hope this season it's my Premier League team and not yours.
For those who don't know, I'm a big Manchester United fan.
I'm sorry, brother.
No, I had the Alex Ferguson years. Anyway, for those, especially Americans, who we are now completely disenfranchising with this conversation, all I will say is if there are any Manchester United fans out there, I can normally get tickets to games at Old Trafford. So reach out. I'd love to meet. If people are interested in this podcast, I'd certainly be interested in meeting them at Old Trafford for a beer.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you could have some takers for that. I'll take you up on that one, man. I'll come to Old Trafford for the game. See you. Hey, Tottenham, not Tottenham, doesn't matter.
Okay, sounds good.
Max, where can people find you?
So I am most active on LinkedIn. So if you type in Max Hunter, if that's not enough, Max Hunter, Chief Joy Officer, you'll find me there. Otherwise, of course, the TED Talk is on the TEDx YouTube site. Again, if you type in my name in there, I believe it's all about the key to building successful teams. Although, of course, the word togethership is key there too. Otherwise, Motivators at Work, you can find us at www.motivatorsatwork.com.
Max, fantastic. We will link your TED Talk. It was great. It was very well received too. Like I told you, the comments loved it. And I think you're doing important work, my man.
Thanks, Alex, and look forward to catching up with you again outside of podcast.